Hello, this video is about how to help other people be more responsible by knowing their type. I gotta like foof my hair and make myself look good because no one's gonna want to watch me if I don't, right? So I'm here in front of my charts. I'll show you. Wait, no, this doesn't turn around. Never mind, I don't know. That does not make it turn around. Okay. So I'm just going to be looking at my charts to say this a little bit more quickly, not to think about it too much. But the second cognitive function down in someone's ego stack or personality stack, cognitive function stack, however you want to call it, is the button you're going to push to help someone become more responsible. And it can help you become more responsible too, if you know your own type. But if you have someone in your life that's like really not very responsible, or you want them to be more responsible, this is literally how you help them become more responsible. So we're going to go through each of the types, and we'll do 2 types at a time because for every like function that's in that slot, there's 2 types that applies to. So we'll start with ENFPs and ESFPs. They both have FI parent, which is authenticity, according to the Personality Hackers podcast, if you ever listen to that one. I learned some good things from them some time ago. But the way that these 2 people become responsible is really knowing how they feel about things and actually like trying to evaluate what their morals and values are. And also their self-worth. So the irresponsible version of ESFPs and ENFPs kind of like is shifty about their own self-worth, and they become more responsible when they really realize what their values are, how they really feel about things. It takes time to be like, how do I feel about things? And especially if you're an FI parent who was raised by some really strong FE users that were constantly pounding into you like ethics and like this is how other people feel, and you were like, I want to know how I feel. Well, this is longer than I was thinking it was going to be. Anyways, so FI parent, just be like, yo, how do you feel about that? Actually ask any FI user, how do you feel about that? Because that is like what an FI user is for, is to be like, this is how I feel about that. And if they don't know how they feel about it, something is wrong, especially if they have a higher FI function. Just saying. Okay, next types. Okay, let's go with ESTPs and ENTPs. They have TI parent, so that's pretty simple. You're just gonna be like, what's actually true? What's actually true, ESTP? What's actually true, ENTP? Or you're just telling them the truth. Like, well, here's actually the truth about what happened. If you tell them the truth, then they can be more responsible with their TI parent. Or you can say, ask them like, what's true for you? Because introverted thinking, TI parent, it's the introverted thinking function. So it's personal truth, like they're going to do logic themselves. So help them by asking them about how they figured out what they think is true for them. Okay, let's go with NI parent now. That's ENTJs and ENFJs. NI parent is all about their personal future, how they see their future. So you're going to be like, asking them, how do you see your future? What are your plans for the future? How are you going to make that happen? Tell me about how you see the future. That is how they are responsible, is by leaning into their NI parent introverted intuition. Let's go with ESTJ's SI parent and ESFJ's SI parent. So SI is like memory, tradition, organization, how things have always been done, all the memories of someone's maybe growing up years or the good times. So you can help a person with SI parent become more responsible, or you can become more responsible by actually thinking about how you can really share your values through your let me think about this for a second. Okay, so tell them to actually be self-disciplined. I'm sorry, it took me a second to get to that one. But SI is about self-discipline and being like, I'm gonna commit to these series of actions that are gonna give me this result. It's about your routines and your traditions, little traditions like this is how I do things. This is how things get done. So they need to like learn to be self-disciplined, to be responsible. Okay, let's go to, I think I did all the extroverted types. Okay, so introverted types have an extroverted parent. Did you notice that? The extroverted types have an introverted parent, and the introverted types have an extroverted parent. So let's do that. NE parent. INFPs and INTPs have NE parent, extroverted intuition. So that's going to be like getting them to think about the different possibilities. But have you thought about this, Jones? Have you thought about this, MacArthur? Have you thought about this? What about that? You just gotta like show them another possibility that they weren't thinking about. Because to those two types, it's all about what makes them feel good, or for the INTP, it's about what they think is true, and they can argue about anything until they think like, well, what about this possibility? Say like, you forgot about this one possibility in INTP. That's how you help an INTP be more responsible. Be like, what about this possibility? Okay, SE parent. Sensation. Okay, it's extroverted sensing. So ISTPs and ISFPs are SE parents. You can be like, dude, you're not giving me a good experience. I felt this way, you made me do this, and you made me do that, and you're not giving me a good experience. Like they want to, SE parent wants to make sure that people are getting a good experience. And so if you encounter one of them, an ISFP or an ISTP that's like, needs to be more aware of the experience they're giving to people, that's how you help them be more responsible. Okay. Then we'll go to INTJ and ISTJ. They have a TE parent, which is about effectiveness. What do other people think? So to help them be more responsible, you're going to point out, well, studies have shown that 48% of people who try this drug or eat apples in the morning or do whatever exercise routine get this result or something like that. You're going to like TE them to death and be like, actually, this is the research. I knew an ISTJ that like, she was very much looking for that, and I was like, hang on, I have TE child, so I need to go and prepare. Like, I do TE, I like step into that box and I'm like, now we're gonna do TE, okay. It's just not something I carry around with me all the time like NE, so. Some people be like, that made no sense. And I'm just like, well, one day, some people make sense too. Okay, so yeah, just be like, what's your rationale, TE parent? What's your rationale about that? Why did you decide to go with those ideas? So that is where an ENTP comes in, to help people actually develop a sense of what is fair and what is caring. And that is so needed when you have people who are like so holding on to their personal value systems that they're not actually willing to understand and hear other people's experiences, to actually know what's actually true for other people. In other words, what people have lived through, what people have actually gone through, and how that made them feel, you know? Can you think of any books that are a bunch of different people's experiences? An ENTP might have written a book like that, maybe. But like, we need ENTPs. ENTPs, the thing is, they're going to be sitting on the outskirts a lot of times. I mean, just depending on like how they choose, but like they're probably like people who left organized religion because they were like, what's the point? Nobody cares. They may be on the outskirts either. They might be like physically in the church, but not like all mentally in the church, or their heart might not all be in the church because they're like, but people, I need to be caring, and like nobody cares in this religion. Some religions are not like that, and some are, right? Maybe, you know, your experience has been different than mine, probably, right? Who knows who you are and who's listening here, but ENTPs listen to people's stories and they retell them to say, here is what is true, and here is how people need to be more compassionate. And if you don't recognize why that could be so useful to you, especially if you're an FI user, and you're like naturally just like, but this makes me feel good, but that makes me feel good, and it's all about you and how you feel. And I went through this myself, I had to stretch to be willing to listen to an ENTP because I was like, you're making me uncomfortable. My FI feelers were like, I can't handle this. But like, you grow when you listen to ENTPs talk. And if they are responsible about telling you what's true and helping you realize what it truly means to be caring for different people out there, like that's them living out the best version of themselves. Really, it is. And ENTPs are like the debaters. They're the people that like can debate anything, and they're like they're a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit of everything. But they're in the heart temple, so they're very passionate. They're very passionate about what they do. And gosh, I gotta think if there's anything else I want to say about that. So, well, I guess the last thing I'll say is like, for example, I've been going through a faith transition, and there's definitely just a lot of like people that I can encounter on like both sides of like, in or out of this like faith, right? And they're like, well, I know it's true, and it's like that's all that matters. I don't care about anything else, like I know it's true, therefore go away. I don't care what you have to say, And there's people on the outside that are like, oh, I have an opinion. Does anyone want to hear my opinion? And the people on the inside are like, no, we don't. Like, we're covering our ears. Like, no, we don't want to hear that. But if you had an ENTP that was like, I want to hear what you have been through, and then they helped the people on the inside be like stretching to be willing to be more comfortable hearing different stories of things that people that actually went through, TI parent, these are the truths. Like, this is logic. This is like, TI is like, this is like the most responsible like thought process. It's not TE where it's like, well, here's what everyone else thinks and who knows what is holding that up or propping that up. It's like, I'm finding out what's the bottom line, the basic truths of like really hearing people's experiences and their NE here was like putting it all together intuitively to try to help people become more compassionate so they can fulfill their child function of FE. So, oh, I guess the last thing I can say about ENTPs is that they will condemn you if you do not learn how to be compassionate and actually listen to what other people have actually gone through. One thing I was thinking of a second ago or a minute ago was like the church that I decided to step away from, which is the LDS Church, in case you're not listening to my other videos or if this is like the first video you watched. Like at Christmas time, everybody is very compassionate and it's like, la-da! But the rest of the year, they ain't compassionate at all. And I mean, there's definitely like case histories or case studies where you could be like, well, that's not true for 100% of the people all the time. But like majority, it's just like, they're just doing what makes them feel good. And they're just kind of stuck in an FISI thing, like, I feel good, here's what we've always done, I feel good, this is what we've always done. But, they're scared of the ENTPs out there that are, like, actually going to break things up in order to, like, make things more caring, you know what I mean? When I was on my mission, we were supposed to do service every week. Like, many years ago, I served a mission, an LDS mission. We did service. We had to go to a different church to, like, help serve in their soup kitchen because our church did not have one. It was an interesting experience of like, being like, I'm in the true church, I'm in the best church, but like, we don't have a soup kitchen. We're not like doing something like so caring, so selfless. And it's not to say that the church doesn't do any, they serve in the ways they want to, but it's just kind of like interesting. I don't know. Maybe some ENTPs out there have some suggestions, that you guys could listen to about how you could be more caring and actually listen to people's experiences and really be like, that's really what this person went through. That's not fair. That's how you know an ENTP is doing their right thing. Like they're living their life because that's what they're here for. You know what I mean? That's what they're here for. And you can be scared of ENTPs all day long because a lot of times they put people into like fear mode because just they can be so slaying it with just like constant ideas about like what is true and what is not true, and just like the flood of ideas of truth and like not truth like can be overwhelming and scary. Like that's how I felt when I first listened to C.S. Joseph, and I was like, oh my gosh. But the more you like lean into listening to what they have to say, you'll be better for it. To just consider, like, maybe that could be true. Maybe I could let myself be a little uncomfortable and hear what they have to say. You could be so much better off for listening to an ENTP. Now, it's not to say that no ENTP is ever going to like show up and be irresponsible with their TE parent or TI parent. I said TE parent. TI parent is what they have, because the parent function is about responsibility versus irresponsibility, and them being irresponsible looks like insincerity. So when they show up as insincere, they're not really like in the light. Their virtue and vice, according to C.S. Joseph, which I totally believe in, is sincerity versus insincerity. So a sincere ENTP will help you become more caring, more tolerant towards listening to different people's stories that might be invalidating toward you. Oh my gosh, or it can be scary. It's really hard sometimes for an FI user to listen to people's stories where something bad happens, because they do not like feeling bad, but you need an ENTP to hold your hand. Like, seriously. Let an ENTP help you develop compassion today.